Just want to say another thank you to all my patrons for the support. I really appreciate you guys. RJ, Alex, Bonnie, Andy, Steph, Baron, Andrew, Rachel, Shad, Madison, and Kevin. Thank you guys so much. All right, it's time for my August wrap up. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Theo. Thank you so much for hanging out. Today is a quick one. It's just my August wrap up, everything that I read in the month of August and what I thought. So I managed to get through a few books in the month of August and I actually finished my very first manga volume, which is the Vinland Saga volume number 1. And I guess I'll probably just start by showing this one. I started this in the month of July and I ended up finishing it in August. I think I gave this one 4 stars. I wasn't normally gonna, rate a manga because I don't know, it reads differently, but I thought I'd give it a rating because I finished it, why not? And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Actually, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It was my first entry into manga, and I got the hang of it. It's read from right to left and top down and that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit challenging at first, but I got the hang of it pretty quick, and I ended up enjoying it. I love the art. I like the aesthetic. I like the time frame. I love the history that it injects into there. I like the time jumping a little bit back and forth and the flashback when the main character is a kid. And I have the second and third and fourth volumes on the shelf behind me because I think that the first arc kind of runs into the fourth volume. So I'm excited to continue with this. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to have something visual when I'm a little bit tired from reading and something a little bit different. So I really enjoyed this one. And I think based on my experience with this one, I would be keen to try other manga. So if you have some kind of manga that you think I should read, let me know in the comments. I do have the first volume of Berserk, which has been on my radar for a long time. And I also want to try Uzumaki is the other one that I want to pick up. And I heard that that one is kind of super crazy, super dark. And so I think I would mesh with that one. So yeah, for a first time manga experience, I had a good time and I enjoyed it. The next one that I read is a historical fiction book. And I read this kind of as a buddy read with my friend Kyle at Read by Kyle. He is very well versed in historical fiction, but also more so than I am in this author, Con Iggulden. He's read plenty of Con Iggulden before. This was actually my first experience with him. And I enjoyed it. This one was the story of Cyrus and the 10,000 Greeks that march on the Persian king, his brother Artaxerxes. And it also follows Xenophon and Clearchus. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I should know. I'm always conflicted because I want to say the Greek pronunciation, but I don't know what the generally accepted, English pronunciation is of a name. So I'm always weird about saying, Greek names. But anyway, this one was a really good one. I liked it more than Kyle did. I think that has to do with the fact that Kyle has read quite a few books by Con Iggulden, and some of them which are considered his best. And so I think going back to this one, he wasn't as impressed. And I think he noted that the structure of the book kind of changed. Not the structure. I think it was just, he noted the structure wasn't great, and I would probably agree, but also the narrative kind of takes a turn and we end up following different people. I was thinking that this would follow Cyrus and then also Xenophon, who, if you don't know, you could just quickly Google, but Xenophon played a very important role in this particular march and battle and all that kind of stuff, and in just politics and philosophy. He was a student of Socrates, and he played an important role in, that era of ancient Greece. And so I thought he was going to be more in the story than he was. He kind of comes in near the end, and I guess it just depends on what your expectation is and how much history you know. Me, I didn't know a whole lot about this going into it. I knew a little bit, and I think that's why I was thinking that certain characters would be more prevalent than maybe they were. Kyle is very well read and has a very good grasp on this type of history. History was his minor, I believe. And so I think, it depends on how much you know, and depends on what your expectations were. And it depends what you've read in the past, what type of historical fiction, and what books by this author that you've read. So he's read some of the best of Con Iggulden, and I think this one fell short for him. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 star. I think I gave it a 3.5 is what I rounded it to. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was cool to get a taste of his writing style. A nice short little historical fiction book. I've been on a little bit of a historical fiction kind of kick. I felt to, in the mood to read a little bit of historical fiction, particularly the Greek and Persian stuff. So this one fit the bill for me and was kind of exactly what I needed, but it wasn't like the best book I've ever read, but it was good. And if you're curious to try Con Niggleton and you have any affinity for Greek or Persian history, historical fiction at all, this one's kind of a cool one to try. And I think that maybe starting with something like this instead of his, best books might be okay too, because then you get a taste and you can work your way up to some of his better known series, or you can just start with some of the best if you want to skip something like this. But it was a pretty good book. 3-star for me. I enjoyed it. Next, I read The Lesser Devil, which is a novella and a kind of a prequel to Howling Dark, which was the next full novel that I read. And that is, of course, book number 2 in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio. Now, The Lesser Devil is from the point of view of Crispin, who's Hadrian's brother. And it was a short little novella, and it was really nice to get a glimpse into sort of what was happening after Empire of Silence and maybe concurrently with some of the events in Howling Dark, and just get a little bit more exposure to Crispin. I think Crispin is going to become more of an important character down the road. And I've sort of was intrigued by Crispin and how he was portrayed and described in Empire of Silence. I can see now after reading The Lesser Devil that there might be a little bit of a unreliable narrator in both cases. And you can kind of see that contrast in how Crispin, for example, was described versus what you might think of him hearing the story or hearing part of his story from his perspective. So I really enjoyed that. The writing was great. Christopher Rocchio is extremely impressive as a writer. His stories are very well told, very interesting. And then after I read The Lesser Devil, I picked up Howling Dark, and this is really where the series just picked up for me. I liked Empire of Silence, but it was a book 1, and it set a lot of things up. It established a lot of characters. It gave you the sense of what the reality and the world and kind of the normalcy looks like, and then blows up and expands and shit gets crazy in Howling Dark. And the last, I would say, this was probably like a 4-star book for me for the most part. And then I don't know actually what I gave it. Let me just double check. I gave it a 4.5. And I think this one was like a 4-star for the majority of the book, which for me is a very good rating. I would say most of my reads are going to be, 4 stars if I really enjoyed them. A 5-star book has to be extremely special. And while this one was almost there was a lot to unpack, and it took its time to kind of set a lot of crazy plot developments up. And so the last, I think where this book shines is the last 25 to 30, 35%. The last third of this book was nonstop craziness, and it really made this book a 4.5. It could even be, I would say, on a reread or maybe even in hindsight, could be a 5-star book, but it's a 4.5 for me for now. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to start Demon in White tomorrow, starting next week. I'm very, very excited to continue on with the Sun Eater series. Everything continues to get better. Like I said, the tail end of this book is crazy. I loved it. I enjoyed talking about it. We just had a live stream with a couple booktubers as well as the author Christopher Rocchio. So go ahead and check that out. That's on Alex's channel, Tall Guy Reads. And we had a blast talking spoilers of Howling Dark. There's so much in this, so much to sit and think about and theorize, and just the themes and the philosophy and the characters and the arcs and the relationships. So much to love here. I can't wait to continue on with this series. And I urge you, if you like sci-fi at all, go ahead and pick this one up. The last book was actually one that was a patron pick. So I opened up for the month of August to my patrons to go ahead and choose a book from a list. I think I gave 5 or 6 to choose from. And this is the one that most patrons chose in their vote. And that was City of Brass by S.A. Chakrabarty. This book I wanted to love a lot more than I did. I think I gave this one a 3-star, which is not bad. For me, a 3-star is a fun book. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I may or may not recommend it if I think people will enjoy it. I don't think that I would reread a 3-star book. And a 3-star book usually is one where I'm not necessarily as eager to pick up the subsequent volume or the next book in a series as I would hope that I would be. So this one is basically a desert fantasy. It takes place in sort of like a fantastical Cairo, kind of Egypt, think deserts and sand dunes and all this stuff. And then there's a part of the book that takes place in an entirely fictional, fantastical city called Daevabad. And there's a lot of things to like in here. I think the vibe, the aesthetic is cool. For a summer read, this one is a great choice because it's just, you know, the heat and the summer and the desert and all that stuff. It really fits sort of that mood and that aesthetic. And if you like desert fantasy, I think you'll really enjoy this one. People seem to love this series. The covers are incredible. I own all three. They're beautiful, beautiful books. The writing was impressive. Some of the characters were pretty good. I mean, I would say most of them were compelling enough. There were just a lot of things in this book that I didn't like, unfortunately. It came across a little bit YA, and I have to admit that I don't think I'm necessarily the target demographic for this book. I do hear that it gets away a little bit from the YA-ness of this first book in the second. But I do hear some of the tropes that I disliked in this book are also present in the next ones. Some of the tropes that I disliked in this book have to do with sort of like an enemies to lovers type trope. And then that happened also very quickly on some occasions where it's kind of like an insta love. There's also a love triangle, which I just don't like. Every time we would get away from sort of the YA stuff and some of the tropes that I mentioned, I would enjoy myself, and then we would get back and some of that stuff, particularly the love triangle, would be kind of thrown back in your face, and it would just take me out of the story a little bit, and it just took away from my overall enjoyment. So while I liked the book and I appreciated the aesthetic and the writing and kind of what it tried to do, it kind of just fell a little bit short for me. I don't necessarily think that I'm in a rush to read the second book. I think there are a lot of other books I'd like to prioritize before I get back to the Daevabad trilogy, but I would eventually like to get back and read these books because there was enough to enjoy, enough to keep me intrigued. The magic system is intriguing. There's a lot of, maybe not a lot of politics yet to unpack in the first book, but I can see the potential for that getting, you know, a bigger stage. But the lore and the history of the land and the magic system and the djinn and sort of the different races and all that kind of stuff, like there's a lot to be interested in, and there's a lot to expand on and explore. So I think there's enough in the rest of the trilogy to maybe give this a shot. For now, I'll go ahead and put a pin in this one. I'm not exactly sure when I'd wrap this up, but probably more so next year because there's a lot that I want to fit in sort of the tail end of this year. So for now, decent book, 3-star, little disappointing, but I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, that's all I had time to read last month, guys. You know, a couple books and a manga. Basically, you know, not too bad of a reading month. A couple 4-stars, couple 3-stars, kind of in that range. Whatever. They're not all going to be 5-star books. I would say my book of the month is Howling Dark. That was just an exceptional experience. I had a really good time. I can see his writing improving, as impressive as it was to start off with. I'm just so invested in the world and the characters, just where this whole story is going to go. There's a lot of different elements. Again, I gave Howling Dark, I think 4.5 star, and I have a feeling that Demon in White that I'm going to start tomorrow, hopefully, is probably going to be the first 5-star in this series for me. So I can't wait. And I'm also curious to hear what you guys read last month. And if you've read any of these, what you guys thought. Did you agree, disagree? How did you rate these? And let me know in the comments. Curious to hear what you guys have on the go. And otherwise, I'll talk to you guys soon on the next one.